And we're back. It's been, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months since I made this thing. I can't really remember. I've kind of just been walking by it every day for a few months now, thinking, oh yeah, I got to get back to this thing. I needed it to cure. I wanted a full 30-day cure because it enables a better paint job. And that's what we're doing here today. We're going to be scraping and painting this guy. It's been so long, I hardly even remember where I was at with this, but it's a planter pot, a pretty big one at that. Freehand sculpted, so it's not like perfect dimensions like you'd get in a form that you could get if you made a form for it. I just freehand sculpted it. It's pretty heavy. It's going to be pretty strong. Like you could put like a small tree in this thing, I'm pretty sure. I did drill a drainage hole in the bottom there. And that's about it. I can tell by the finish, not by the memory, that I did not complete the scraping stage. I see that I scraped the edge here. When I go back to the video, this will all be one right after the other, but I can see that it's not finished. So I'm going to do some scraping and sanding here before I paint it. And after I do the scraping and sanding, you could dry brush it and then paint it right away. But that is inferior to taking it outside and washing it down. I mean, even an acid wash, you could argue, would be a good idea, and then neutralize it with a TSP rinse. But a heavy rinse or 2 rinses, I guess, maybe is enough for me. If you're going to, scrape and sand it, you have to get all that loose, sandy debris off, because anything like that still on there when you paint is going to completely ruin or interrupt the quality and consistency of the paint job. So we're going to scrape it down, we're going to sand it. What I'm going after here with the scraping and sanding is I don't want anything else to break off after I paint it. If it's a little piece that's kind of sticking out and it looks like it's going to break off, or there's a cosmetic imperfection here in the top that obviously you're not going to want, take it off now. Don't take it off after you paint it. When you paint the concrete, now when you experience further deterioration of it, it can stand out. You can notice the difference between the gray and then whatever color you're painting it. And the further from gray you are, the more noticeable these kinds of deficiencies are going to be. So I'm going to show you some scraping and sanding here. Let's talk about the tools. So, I mean, you could use pretty much anything you want. I think they call it a grinding stone. It's just a man-made product. It's got some grit to it. You scrape with it. It gives it a very distinct pattern that I like a lot for very large pieces, like if you're building a big waterfall or something like that, or giant landscaping boulders. One of these is imperative to the process, but this is more of like a delicate finish that I don't necessarily want to mar or scar with this tool here. I want to be a little bit more careful, and that's why I'm going to be using basically just sandpaper. I've got 180 and 220 here, and I've just got a file. And that's really all I'm gonna need. I'm gonna put on a mask before we get started, but just very carefully, file down the edges, any imperfections that I don't like, anything that looks like it's weak and will probably end up breaking off in the future, go ahead and take it off now. And so I think that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so here we are, clean, dry, dust-free, ready to paint. And the process that I'm using, I'm not going to go into detail. I have another tutorial for how to paint concrete, and search for exactly that on my channel. You'll find a long-form tutorial on it. In short, we're going to use watered-down acrylic paint because we're going to use an acrylic sealer later, also water-based, and this makes sure that everything's going to be compatible. So this is the color scheme we're going with here. I think you can see those. A lot of earth tones, browns, tans, cream colored, white, black. This is kind of what I'm going to be going for with this thing. So let's just go ahead and get started. So here we are back for the next stage. It's only been a few minutes, but the concrete is well cured, dry, and thirsty, so the small amount of paint that I'm putting on is absorbed pretty readily, but it is important to not overdo it. You do want to go, little by little, and if I wanted this a darker brown in the middle, I shouldn't just keep adding. I should let it totally dry, then add another light layer. Do that 2 or 3 times if you want a more stable, consistent coloration. But again, light layers is the key to getting that done. So next is going to be the, I don't know, tan taupe, whatever you want to call that. It's going really well so far. We've allowed some time for the layers to dry. Gonna keep moving along with the layers here. This band of color is going to be, it's pretty light. I don't know how well you can make that out there, but it's, kind of like a cream brown color. And I just made that using, some of the brown and the tan and the white and kind of mixed them together and made that. And that way I know that it's made up from the same colors, so it should be complementary. And that's what I'm going to do on the top and the bottom here. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, we're gonna add a little bit more color just to the inside rim here, just so that it's not such an abrupt transition between, our coloration and then just the original gray of the concrete. Now we need to let it dry again. Well, at this stage, I was going to move on past the coloration. But you know how it is, you're kind of staring at it and it's just not what I feel like it's too gray looking. Like the cream color that I had, it's definitely like a brown undertone, not a gray. But with the gray of the concrete, it just kind of steals the show there and it feels very gray, where I wanted more browns and tans and cream colors. So I think what I'm gonna do is go ahead and I'm gonna add a little bit more, just a tiny bit more of this chestnut brown around the top. And then also I can add a little bit to the inside. Again, I want to kind of fade that transition on the inside so that, I don't want to have the dirt 1 inch from the top and then have, this glaring gray concrete where it's supposed to be all brown and tan and whatever. So let's go ahead and gear up and we'll add that little bit before we proceed. There's another layer or another step that I want to take here. And I'm going to take this spray bottle, that same cream color that we used around the top and the bottom, and I'm just going to, right from the spray bottle, give it a very, very slight mist. With a light color, you don't want to overdo it. This spray bottle is not the ideal one for the situation. I usually use something like, this large or larger at least to get kind of like a speckled pattern. Heck, you could use like a paintbrush, like that old technique of just kind of flicking it at there. And that's what I'm going after, is just kind of some flecks of this cream color, if it works out. And you're not going to see anything, especially from this distance. It's very subtle. and it's something that you really don't appreciate until you've done a couple other layers, finish it up, and then put the sealer on it, and that kind of really makes all the different colors pop a little bit more. And that's what I find that with these kind of light colors as one of my near to last steps, I find that sometimes it adds to the depth and the character of the color. If you're looking at like a boulder or marble or any other thing like that from far away, it's like, oh yeah, it's brown, tan, yellow, whatever. If you get right up close and look at it, it's made up of a bunch of tiny different dots of all these different colors, and that's kind of why you take the time to add all these layers, each one seeming to add hardly anything to it, but by the end it actually adds up to be something appreciable and looks pretty good. So just a couple of dots of this. This doesn't aerate the same way that the airbrush does, so I don't think I need a mask here. When you're doing any kind of spraying, the sprayers are inconsistent. You'll get big blotches and whatever. With a light color, not a big deal. With a dark color, very big deal. But even still, just a little paper towel as you're going. If you spray it, if you don't like it, you have a millisecond to jump in there and absorb it. And if you do that, you can pretty much pull most of the color out. That's all I'm going for. Again, I don't expect you'll even see pretty much anything there. Just the slightest. That's it. That's all I'm going for. So I'm going to let that dry thoroughly, and then we can go ahead and proceed to what should be, I think, the last layer, which is going to be a black layer. Okay, so we let that dry a little bit. I want to add just a little bit more. So same as last time, I'm going to spray it on, but this is pretty much white, and it needs to be even lighter than the last one. So hopefully I can accomplish. This is good. Very, very light touch with the white. I think in the last video I said that we were on to the last layer, black, but when you're standing back and staring at it, it's always, you see something like, oh, I think it could be a little better. That's how I know this is like an artistic process, because it's the same every time. It's this meticulous process of 100 individual steps, and you just see a camera cut, but I step back and I'm just kind of staring at it. It's like, no, I like it, but it's not how I want this different, and you make 100 tiny fussy little changes throughout the whole thing, and this is the point at which I know the magic happens. This is how I know it's art, because every time you finish it, 100 steps, step back, I hate it. I hate every one, and that's how you know it's art, because as soon as I finish, I can't stand it. Nope, that's not what I wanted at all. I don't like it. And always when I come back to it later, when it's a finished thing and I've forgotten it and I've moved on, and I come back later, maybe it's, outside, my wife's planted a tree in it, and I'm like, I really like this thing. This thing is great. What was I thinking that I didn't like it? It's fantastic. I love it. But that's how I know it's an artistic process, because it's the same every time. It's 100 steps, then I hate it, then you wait, and then you love it. Well, speaking of waiting, we gotta wait some more. Tiny little dots, I know, but drying in between each layer is critically important to this process. If I were to just keep going, you will lose the individual dots. The paint layers will meld together, and we don't want that. We want individual layers. Okay, so here we are, ready for the last stage, which is going to be a layer of black. Now, I want a speckled pattern with the black, and I want to use a fairly heavy layer of it, It's not super heavy, as you can see, but where this is darkest around the middle, I want to use less. Where it's lightest at the edges here, I want to use more black coloration. And again, this isn't like a uniform color like the air sprayer. This is just dots of black. And ideally, I want various sizes, small, medium, and large. And I mentioned before, it's like that effect where you use a paintbrush and just flick it and you get a bunch of dots on there. That's what we're going for, but you can use a spray bottle for it. We'll see how it goes. It's a very important layer. It's the most important layer. This is where it really comes together or falls apart sometimes, because with the black, it's a very strong color. The concrete's very thirsty. As you spray it on, if the sprayer lets you down and puts a big ugly glob and you don't like it, you can take some paper towel or something absorbent, and you can get in there and you can usually pull a bunch of that color out, but you have to be lightning fast on it, and it's really unforgiving, especially with black. And sometimes, you're doing a piece and you put 100 layers into it, and you get to the black layer and you pull the trigger and it just does something terrible and it looks awful, and you're like, how can I even get rid of this? And you really can't. Like, you can blend it, you can fade it, you can use some of these colors that we've used already, and I can come back and I can add more color on top of that. Often what works well is a paper towel or a sea sponge is one of the things I like to use. Do lots of blotting and whatnot. Hopefully that doesn't happen. This is an old sprayer, that's why I'm mentioning it. If you have a brand new sprayer, then it's probably going to work really well. I'm totally out of sprayers. This one's old. I think it's going to work. It should work. And we'll get started, give it a try here, and if there's any parts I don't like, I'll just try to fix it up as best as I can. But some, like big blotches, that's not a defect. It's kind of what I'm going for here. Let's see. You can see some coloration there. Hopefully you can see that. I like that. Okay. It's probably pretty good, just like that. Okay, just gonna give it just a little spray under here. Good enough for me. And that's it. I don't think there's any parts I don't like. I mean, it looks good already. Probably you can see here, like, this is a process that it looks way better in person than it does on film, but I think that once I apply the sealer layer and we get a little bit more of that pop differentiation between the layers, all those individual layers that we added, I think we've got something that looks pretty good and that I can be happy with. Let's see if I can just showcase it just a little more. Lighter, very light on this side. Maybe a little more down there, or do I leave it? I think maybe just a tiny bit more there. I like it. I like it. I think it's going to look really good once I put the sealer layer on it. Got a little bit on top, a little bit inside. All right, so it's very important here, before you put a sealer layer on it, you have to let this dry thoroughly. And you're like, oh, there's hardly anything on there, it's probably fine. Maybe even it is. At minimum overnight is how long I'm gonna leave something like this before I put the sealer layer on it, because the sealer reacts with water, and we added a lot of water to that paint. The paint takes a while to dry, truly dry anyway. So we're just gonna leave it, let it sit overnight, and then we apply an acrylic sealer. And we know we're not going to have any conflict between the coloration and the sealer because we're using acrylic water-based paints, acrylic water-based sealer, no problems. I'll see you tomorrow.